As the Blue Max crew heads down track, our next pair gets ready to go. Mike Dunn at the wheel of the Hawaiian against John Brute Force. Roland Leong, the owner of the Hawaiian. Mike Dunn, the driver, a second-generation drag racer. A very optimistic Frank Hawley, we might add, as he is the defending champion here at the Gator Nationals. John Force against Mike Dunn, the next race we'll be watching. Force out of Southern California, one of the stronger racers on the circuit, has qualified very well for this event down in the 580s. His competition, the second-generation drag racer, Mike Dunn, the son of Big Jim Dunn, now the driver for the Hawaiian, having won several NHRA national event titles in the past couple of years, driving Roland Leong's newest creation, the Hawaiian. The burnouts are completed, both drivers staging very carefully. You see John Force creeping into the light beams across the starting line, signifying he's ready to go. He gets the whole shot, but it's a red light for John Force. Mike Dunn goes up in smoke, and John Force explodes an engine just as he passes through the lights. The fire rolling out from under the car. He spins it out down in the shutoff area. Fortunately, Mike Dunn had shut it off way early. Here you see the emergency hatch coming open. Let's hope that John Force can get out of that car. There we see him climbing up. The emergency crew already on the scene, dousing him with water. John Force rolling off of the top of the car, taking off his fire protective gloves. And what a wild ride for John Force. A tough break as not only he red lights, but as you see again, explodes the engine. Look at the fire coming out from underneath and behind the car. The parachute trying to slow it down. And now the parachute goes the way as the flames burn away the shroud lines. Now the fire really coming up, carrying the onboard fire extinguisher. You notice very little, if any, fire inside the cockpit where the driver is. That's the purpose of that fire extinguishing compound. A tremendous driving job by John Force, and I'm sure he is shaken up, and we'll find out as we go to Steve Evans.
John, you okay?
Fine, Steve.
Again, the safety equipment, what would you do without it?
Save my butt. What could you do?
When we saw the white smoke, that's when the fire bottles hit, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Save me. I love it.
Did you have any idea where you were on the course?
Just from the steering wheel, because the front end was staying intact, and it was a little bit sideways, and Roland must have done a good job because he didn't ram me, because I know I crossed him a little bit. And I could see, and when it turned sideways, the fire cleared some, and God, I can't believe I red lighted up there.
I didn't know that either. In fact, you just told me that's the first time I've known that. Cars, we can replace. Good guys like you, we can. I'm really glad to see you're okay, everybody is.
Thank you.
There's some work coming up, and some work was performed on this car. This is John Force. And it is not normal to see all the racer tape, as it's called, all over the front of his fiberglass-bodied funny car. John Force in round number 2 is racing Mark Oswald, the driver of the Candies and Hughes Pontiac Trans Am-bodied car. Oswald from Cincinnati, Ohio, driving for the Louisiana-based crew, while John Force hails from Fullerton, California. Force is another of those racers at the Spring Nationals that is very fortunate to be in the second round. Back in the first round, after he defeated Kenny Bernstein, John Force had his parachute look like a streamer. And once again, trying to stop the car, John Force takes dead aim on those catch nets at the end of the racetrack. Force guiding his car towards the center of the track and the center of the net, much slower than we saw Mike Dunn go into it. The net stretches, then responds and stops John Force.
John Force won the battle here, but may have lost the war. John, a good job of hitting the net as you're supposed to, and you might be able to fix this car.
We always fix them, Steve.
That's true. You've done this in the past.
I double-checked the chute twice. I didn't shove my cable far enough. My error. That's just a stupid mistake. I knew it when it didn't blossom. I went for it again. It was just too late.
Well, John's okay. The car, a bit of damage, but as he said, we always fix them, Steve.
And fix it he did, Steve, as back at the starting line in the second round, John Force is ready to do battle with Mark Oswald. There is a lot of tape holding that fiberglass body together, but the NHRA officials have looked it over, says it's okay. And here's John against Oswald. Mark Oswald out as John Force headed for the guardrail. It had been a little tougher to fix at that point, and he hit the guardrail. He did not, and Mark Oswald streaks to the win at a 6.18 second elapsed time. His speed a fine 241 miles an hour. A lot of work by John Force and the crew.
And Prudhomme goes into round two. Mrs. John Force, backing up her talented husband, a full-time professional funny car driver, John Brute Force, also from Southern California. So important, that process of backing them up in the tracks in which they burned out. His opposition, his opponent, will be the beautiful Hawaiian punch car, owned by Roland Leong and driven by Mike Dunn.
Mike Dunn, the runner-up here a year ago to Don Prudhomme in the funny car final. But right now, it's the first round of competition. 16 of the best funny cars in the world assembled for the Summer Nationals.
Mike Dunn, lucky to be here at all. He had an awful fire at the Spring Nationals, destroyed the car. This is the new Hawaiian, and it is a tremendous race until John Force simply out-muscles him on the far end at 6:01, 243 miles an hour to a losing 6:11. John Force has been runner-up at this event. That was 3 years ago, hoping to do at least that well today, and off to a good start.
A tenth of a second difference between the two cars, and you can see what a tenth of a second is at the finish line. It's like 4 or 5 car lengths, and we literally deal in tenths, hundredths, and even thousands of a second.
We begin our coverage of today's competition with second round action in the funny cars. In the near lane of the white car is John Force. He's up against the record setter in Ken Benny.
Ken Benny hails from Wadsworth, Ohio. He does indeed hold the national record at a whopping 254 miles an hour. He's quite an innovator. He manufactures a lot of the racing parts that his fellow competitors utilize. He's up against John Force of Fullerton, California, who, despite not ever having won a big race, has managed to earn a living as a full-time professional in this drag racing sport.
John Force in the white car in the near lane as he inches toward the start line. Staging lights count down the start vital. Often the race is decided at the very moment of the green light. John Force is away first, and Ken Benny in the far lane, favored in this race, finds himself falling behind John Force. A winner and advancing to the semifinal round, John Force in a major upset.
Force was the better of the two drivers today. He reacts first to the Christmas tree starting system. Now Force is losing traction just a little bit. You see the tires starting to smoke. He's really having to drive this race car. No easy piece of work for John Force. He won it on what they call a hole shot.
And Don Prudhomme's opponent in the semifinal round, John Force, has demonstrated remarkable adeptness at timing perfect starts. That's how he advanced this far with great starts so far today.
Don Prudhomme taking a final chance to kind of whack that throttle, keep the tires hot and clean as he moves to the starting line. John Force in the far lane, Don Prudhomme in the near lane. Remember, Prudhomme has won this race the last 3 years. Now, neither driver seems very anxious to put on that top yellow light, the staging light. Occasionally, one driver will try to force the other to stage first. A little brain game possibly going on here. Force finally moves in and stages first. Prudhomme follows. They're ready.
The green light, and away they go. And again, John Force with an excellent start jumps to the lead, and he's going to take Don Prudhomme in the semifinal race with ease. John Force continues his string of upsets at the 83 Summer Nationals with another upset victory over one of the greats, Don Prudhomme.
Now, Prudhomme has been having traction problems in that right-hand lane. He may have tried to leave it something less than full throttle.
Perfectly timed starts, the key to John Force's success today. There he is in the far lane in the white car, beating Don Prudhomme early. Steve is with John Force now.
Well, John Force, a little staging battle up there. Did you maybe hope to force Prudhomme to build a little more heat than he wanted to?
No, I raced Prudhomme a lot of times, and he always staged first because my act takes a little longer up there, and when he didn't, I just went ahead and staged.
Frank Iaconio, a popular champion here in New Jersey, and now to be decided, the funny car final between Mark Oswald in the blue car in the near lane and John Force, who's run so well and upset Victor earlier in this day.
Mark Oswald in the near lane, Don, is no stranger to the winner's circle here at Raceway Park. He won here last year driving for the same team in another eliminator category. John Force has also been in a final round here about 4 years ago, but he was denied the championship.
When that nitromethane fuel is pumped through the carburation system and ignites, it creates a roar and a thrust of power that is awesome. This the finals of funny car competition. Mark Oswald, blue car near lane. John Force, white car far lane.
Can John Force pull up another one of those hole shots? He's been doing it all day long. Force is the last to stage. We're ready. John Force again off first.
But look at the power of the Oswald car as he rockets from behind It's Mark Oswald, the victor in the funny car competition at the 1983 Summer Nationals.
Mark Oswald needed top speed of the event to drive by John Force over 251 miles an hour.
The perfectly timed starts of John Force in the white car have been the talk of the Summer Nationals. Here he executes another great start, but he doesn't have enough car to hold off Mark Oswald, who has enough straightaway to rip ahead and take the Summer National funny car competition. And with this victory, the 30-year-old Oswald moves into a virtual first-place tie with Frank Hawley in the overall world point standings in funny car.
Mark Oswald already receiving congratulations as the Summer Nationals funny car champion, his second consecutive national event title in only his first year as a funny car driver. You'll remember he won here a year ago at the Summer Nationals in another category. No stranger to the winner's circle here is Mark Oswald. Mark going over to congratulate John Force on a beautiful final round. Very, very close racing. But for Force, his first national event still remains just slightly beyond his grasp.
The next pair of cars started at the starting line and into the water, designed to allow the tires to start spinning. Then that smoke you see coming off the tires actually burning the rubber across the starting line. The body goes down over the 2,500 horsepower plus and tubular chassis of Billy Meyer, the defending champion. He's driving a Pontiac Trans Am bodied replica in this funny car category. Billy Meyer took about a month and a half off. His crew returned to his Waco, Texas home, and they said, we have got to get our act together before the Nationals. He did no racing for almost a month and a half and came in here and qualified in the number 2 position. Meantime, a tough loss for Mark Oswald. Let's see if we can find out what happened. On the starting line, John Force from Fullerton, California, a touring racing professional, is taking on the defending champion from Waco, Texas, Billy Meyer. Billy started his career at the age of 16. He has never driven anything but a funny car. And look, there's problems with the Billy Meyer car. The crew raising the fiberglass body to gain access to the engine. Billy is sitting behind the engine. It's still running, and we don't see anything coming out of it. But there's obviously something wrong. A very animated Billy Meyer trying to point and relay with hand signals. Something's wrong with that racing engine. The crew looking over the fuel lines. The supercharger, of course, sitting on top of the engine. John Force patiently talking to his crew, or at least nodding. The body's going back down. Starter Buster Counts checks it to make sure it's A-OK and hooked at the front. And Billy Meyer, your number 2 qualifier, has got problems. If Mark Oswald lost his concentration by looking at his oil pressure, think what Billy Meyer's going through right now. He smokes the tires off the line. John Force, a little loss of traction, but he recovers quickly, and John Force wins the race 5.90 seconds at a speed over 236 miles an hour. But the number 2 qualifier, Billy Meyer, even in defeat.
John Force powers his way past Billy Meyer and into the semifinals. Good weekend for you so far, John.
Well, I think it hurt itself there. I heard some noises. It wasn't a Rotterdam, but a valve broke or something, or a push rod or a spring or something. But, yeah, Myers had trouble up there, and it just gave me a little time, to do a little thinking about that tree. I think, Steve, that tree's my biggest enemy. It scares me more than any racer I've ever raced, more than Perdome, more than McEwen. But I got me a little friendly deal going, and that tree will just hang on a little bit better. We'll share the money here.
Well, John Force has had his share of problems. Over 254 miles an hour. The next car's already started. John Force from Torrance, California, is rolling into the water. John, in the semifinal round here, must win this race to have the right to meet Kenny Bernstein in the finals. Bernstein has been on quite a roll over the last few weeks. A very happy Kenny Bernstein. That record that Steve is talking about was a 254-mile-an-hour run set earlier by Bernstein in qualifying. Here's the car of Alan Aronek and Jim Ouimet. Tom Anderson is the driver. He is racing John Force, about as far apart across the country as you can get. From New York State to California, they all assemble at Indianapolis Raceway Park for the U.S. Nationals. And John Force, bit by the Christmas tree ever so slightly again, as Tommy Anderson. A tremendous start for Anderson, and it paid off at the finish line. Look at the time.
Done for the day.
This racer, John Force, out of Southern California, has a multitude of sponsors. Der Wiener Schnitzel, Stop and Go Market, Mountain Dew, Jolly Rancher Candies. but John Force has become a force to be reckoned with. He is certainly one of the most competitive racers on the national event circuit today. His competition is Joe Pisano with Trip Shoemake at the wheel, a former Southern Nationals champion. Shoemake and Pisano teaming up for the '83 season.
In fact, it was Trip Shoemake who won the event title here 1 year ago, driving the Team B car of Billy Meyer. That is Larry Frazier, who has made the difference, John Force will tell you, in his effort. Frazier has wrenched this car to over 250 miles an hour this season. Force can now concentrate on driving and not worry about making the horsepower, because Frazier has plenty of it under the sleek hood of that Pontiac Trans Am. The far lane is Trip Shoemake. The near lane is John Force. First round of funny car action. They leave right together. John Force starting to pull ahead. John Force dominant here in this matchup at 580. 247 miles an hour. 580-247 for John Force.
Force was the number 3 qualifier going into that race, Steve, at 578, and that's somewhat remarkable. That our next pair, John Brute Force, and he has been having quite a season. His crew chief, Larry Frazier, has made all the difference in the world for Force. He is gaining confidence in his driving abilities. He has made it to the final round several times this season, has yet to win an NHRA national event. But John Force sitting patiently as the crew completes the work on that 2,500 horsepower nitro-burning engine. The fiberglass body comes down. His competition, Sherm Gunn, already doing his burnout. And John Force rolls through the water, and next you'll see the tires smoking.
John Force has consistently had the best reactions, Dave, all season long of any of the funny car drivers. An occasional red light in there to mar that, but if you're not pushing the light, you don't red light once in a while, maybe you're not on time. John Force.
Sherm Gunn, a chassis builder by trade, built this car specifically for this event. A brand new race car for Sherm Gunn. He qualified well and won his first round race, which probably marked his first ever win in national event competition. The burnouts are over, the engine's running up to par, and now it falls on the drivers.
John Force told me recently, Dave, that he's figured out who his enemy is. It's not the other car, it's not the racetrack, it's the Christmas tree. That is the enemy, Force says.
John Force concentrating on that Christmas tree. For Sherm Gunn, he's doing exactly the same thing in the far lane of the track. And John Force with the hole shot. And he pulls ahead to defeat Sherm Gunn by a little over a car length, a 598 to a 604. And John Force, as we watch it replay, takes home the win.
John Force was 0.03 of a second quicker to react. Here he loses traction, and that's got to be a sinking feeling for the driver. They can feel that happen, and if it gets any worse, he is going to be beat by a guy like Sherm Gunn. But Force gets the smoke dried up, backpedaled the car nicely, has really matured as a race car driver.
So John Force getting out of the car in the shutdown area and going back to the pits for another good hour to hour and a half's worth of work for about 5, almost 6 seconds of time out on the racetrack.
A very intense young man.
Arm in arm as they go off the racetrack, and the bodies come down on our funny cars as we get set to go into the semifinal round of competition.
It'll be John Brute Force in the Tower Lane, a native Californian, a former truck driver who about 10 years ago decided he wanted to make his living in this sport, and it has been not easy for John. He has really struggled, gone through an awful lot of equipment. A good businessman, as you can see by all of the logos and sponsors on his race car, and he's finally got the performance to back it all up.
He'll need it because he has to race the #1 qualifier, the 4-time Winston World Champion in the Pepsi Challenger, Don the Snake Prudhomme.
Prudhomme is only...
And Don's got something coming out of the car. You can see there is fluid, liquid of all types coming out. He quickly shuts it off, and the car is on fire. It is the nitromethane fuel, apparently a fuel line split. Prudhomme comes out of the car, crawls away on his hands and knees, and Bob Brandt, his crew chief, quickly hitting it with a fire extinguisher. They back the car up, and no damage to either the car or Don Prudhomme, but what a break for John Force.
Oh, John Force in the far lane will waltz his way into the final round. And Force smokes the tires. It's a good thing he had no opponent, David. He'd have been in real trouble. He'd have probably been defeated.
He'd have been watching Don Prudhomme streaking away in that Pepsi Challenger, but instead Don Prudhomme being pushed back to the pits. The fuel line letting go, certainly holding his emotions in check at the shutdown area as we get set for the funny cars, and here is John Force.
Neither of our funny car finalists have ever been in the NHRA Championship winner's circle. Not little John Lombardo here with the body being latched down, nor John Brute Force.
Little John Lombardo has been racing in Southern California for nearly 2 decades. He is primarily a Southern California racer. He selects events out of the state to go to, but John Lombardo has his first shot ever at winning an NHRA national event.
Now, John Force has been in 3 finals over his 10-year career, but is yet to get the win light in that final sprint.
The burnouts are over. All the work is completed. The crews directing their drivers up to that starting line marked by the yellow stripe across this very sticky asphalt. Little John Lombardo in the far lane, John Force in the near lane, and staging very carefully into those light beams. Both drivers set, and an advantage for Force, and he goes up in smoke. Now Little John goes up in smoke. It's a race to the finish line, and it is Little John Lombardo pulling it out. A tremendous race. Only a 6:32 for each driver, but times don't count. It's who gets to the finish line first.
And it still takes a driver in one of these cars, no matter how sophisticated they get. They leave right together. Force in the near lane will be the first to lose traction. There, too much power for this racetrack. Right now, Force feels, I've lost.
But Little John Lombardo goes up in smoke. He recovers and pulls out by 1 car length the victory over John Force.